2 o'clock, Saturday afternoon. Route 1, the Maine coast. Yellow sun through the rear window of the Hadley Group town car. Holt Pemberton drove the CEO home from a 5-hour shareholder brunch. Camille Hadley slumped in the back seat, eyes closed, breath warm with wine, murmuring one word, "Mama." Her clutch slid from her lap to the carpet. A black and white photograph spilled onto the floor, sharp in the light. Red light. Holt reached down. He had seen that face every night for 10 years, and on the table beside Maggie's bed, his late wife's mother. Green light. He did not move. Holt pulled into the porte-cochere of the Hadley Camden Harbor Inn just before 3. The valet stepped forward. Holt waved him off. He killed the engine and crossed to the passenger door himself. Before he opened it, he slid the photograph into the inside pocket of his coat. Camille was half awake. She did not protest when he lifted her elbow. The bellhop met them at the elevator with her room key. On the threshold of the suite, she said, without looking up, "Thank you, Pemberton." She had called him by his surname for 3 years. "Get some rest, ma'am," he said. He drove back to Camden by the inland route. He picked up Marlo from the babysitter at 4:30. She had a bandage on her thumb from a paper cut at school. He kissed the bandage. He made tomato soup and grilled cheese. He read her the chapter about the storm in the book she liked. She fell asleep before he reached the last page. After he closed her door, he stood in the hallway a long minute, listening to the house breathe. Then he went down to the basement workbench and took the wooden box off the shelf. He had not opened it in 11 months. Inside, beneath a folded scarf and a stack of letters, was the photograph. He laid it on the bench. He took the photograph from his coat and laid it next to the first. 2 prints. Same negative. Same dark stain in the upper right corner. Same young woman, perhaps 20, in a long coat, on a porch he did not recognize. He sat on the basement stool a long time. He did not call anyone. In a small black notebook he kept in his coat pocket, he wrote 3 words, "Hadley, not coincidence." Sunday morning, in the suite at Camden Harbor Inn, Camille came up slowly through layers of headache. The room was bright. Her clutch lay open on the marble side table. She reached for it without sitting up. She felt the lining. She felt the inner pocket. The photograph was gone. A memory floated up from the dark. A man's hand reaching down for something on a sunlit floor mat. Pemberton. She did not call him. She called Thea Kelso instead. Thea had been her family's lawyer since before Camille was born. The phone rang 4 times. "Camille." "Thea, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think before you answer." "Always. Did my mother ever have a child before she had me?" The silence on the line was long enough that Camille walked to the window and back. Long enough that she heard the hush of the surf at the foot of the in-lawn. "Camille," Thea said finally, "we need to meet." 6 weeks earlier, on a wet Tuesday, Camille had been alone in her mother's library, looking for a first edition Eleanor wanted shipped to a charity auction. The book was on a high shelf. When Camille pulled it down, a small photograph slipped out from between the pages. Black and white. No name, no date. She had carried it in her clutch ever since. She had not asked her mother who the young woman was. Some part of her had not wanted to know. Now she did. On Monday morning, Camille drove herself to Portland. She did not tell the office. She did not tell her mother. She met Thea in the small back conference room of the Kelso and Associates building, the one with the curtains always drawn. Thea did not open her briefcase. She did not produce anything. She poured 2 cups of black coffee and set one in front of Camille. "Before I say anything," Thea said, "you should know I have been waiting for this conversation for 32 years, not hoping for it. Waiting." Thea did not give her details. Only a beginning. "Yes. Your mother had a daughter before you. 1994 was the year. She was 19. The baby was a girl. She had named her Margaret on the form and prayed every year that the family had kept the name." Camille drove back to Boston that afternoon, at the legal limit, and not a mile faster. She did not call Pemberton. For the first time in 3 years, she requested a different driver from the pool. The dispatcher acknowledged the change in 2 minutes. He did not ask why. He was good at his job. That night, in her apartment on Beacon Hill, she opened her laptop and made a call she had never made in 3 years. Not to Human Resources. To Hadley Group, Internal Security. She asked for a full background trace on a current employee. Pemberton, Holt R., she specified. Not the HR file. Full history, federal records, court filings, press archives. The report arrived at 11:17 the next morning, hand-delivered by a courier in a Navy windbreaker. She read it standing up. Holt Robert Pemberton, born 1991, Portland, Maine. United States Naval Academy, class of 2013, 3 years active duty as a naval intelligence officer, then Georgetown Law, accelerated program, graduated 2018, hired into the Federal Bureau of Investigation that same year, assigned to the Boston Field Office, white-collar crime division, with a subspecialty in trust fund fraud and shell company networks. 2 prosecutions of note. The first, in 2020, dismantled a layered scheme moving family trust assets through Bermuda. The second, in 2021, exposed a New England family office that had quietly drained an elderly client's estate over 15 years. Both cases resulted in convictions. Both made the inside pages of the Wall Street Journal. Special Agent Pemberton resigned his commission in April of 2022. 8 months later, his wife, Margaret Crane Pemberton, age 28, of Camden, Maine, died of pancreatic cancer. He filed his application to drive for Hadley Group 6 weeks after the funeral. 3 years of perfect performance reviews. 3 declined offers to move up to fleet management. Camille set the report down on her kitchen counter. She did not sit. She walked once around the island. She walked once around it the other way. A former Federal Bureau of Investigation special agent specializing in trust fund fraud had been driving her car for 3 years. She had cried in the back of that car after a board meeting. She had taken a call from her mother in that car about her father's anniversary. She had read a private letter in that car. She had said things, on the phone, with him 3 feet from her. She poured herself a glass of water. Her hand was steady. The water in the glass was not. Outside her kitchen window, the lights of Boston Common burned in the dark. She picked up her phone. She put it back down. She did not call him yet. At 4:15 Tuesday morning, Camille left Boston. She drove herself. The drive to Camden took just under 3 hours by the inland route. She arrived before sunrise. She did not stop at the resort. She did not stop for coffee. She drove the dark coastal road through the sleeping town and turned onto the dirt lane that ran behind the wharf, and she found his house by the address in the file. It was a small wooden cottage with a porch and a clear view of the water. The sky was just beginning to gray. She did not knock. She sat in her car 2 minutes with the engine off. The kitchen light was already on. Through the window she could see a small girl, maybe 7, sitting at the kitchen table in a flannel nightgown, hair sleep-tousled, working with intense concentration on a piece of paper. The girl drew a line, lifted her pencil, and turned her head to consider the next line. Something about the corner of her mouth made Camille set her hand on the dashboard to steady herself. She got out. Holt opened the door before she reached the porch. He was already in a coat. "I figured you'd get here before 7, he said. They sat on the porch. Holt brought out coffee in 2 enamel cups. Marlowe stayed at the kitchen table behind the window, working on her drawing. She had not looked up. Holt set a small frame on the bench between them. Maggie was smiling in the photo, holding up the same black and white print, laughing at something off camera. Camille looked at it a long time. What year was Maggie born? 1994. My mother was 19 in 1994. The wind off the water moved the bare branches of the maple in the yard. The kitchen light made a yellow rectangle on the porch boards. "I didn't know," Holt said, "that you were her sister. I drove you to and from work for 3 years. I didn't know." "When did you find out?" "Saturday afternoon." She turned her head and looked at him, properly, for what she would later realize was the first time. 3 years of professional distance, and she had never actually seen him. He was 40 pounds lighter than the photograph in his file from his bureau graduation. There was gray at his temples that should not have been there at 35. The wedding band was gone. It had left a paler line on the ring finger. She drew the photograph from her clutch and laid it on the bench. He drew the second one from his pocket and laid it next to hers. 2 prints. Same negative. Marlowe appeared at the porch door, eyes round. "Daddy, there's a lady." "I see her, sweetheart. This is Miss Hadley. She came to talk about a friend." Marlowe studied Camille with the unguarded directness of a 7-year-old. Are you the lady from the brunch? Camille felt the breath leave her chest. Daddy was telling me about a brunch yesterday. He said the lady fell asleep. Holt did not flinch. Marlowe, can you finish your map while Miss Hadley and I talk a few minutes? Okay, Daddy. The door closed. Camille looked at Holt. She knows your work. She knows I drive a lady to meetings. She does not know who. The sun came up over the eastern water and lit the photographs on the bench between them. Camille called her mother at 6:45. Come to Camden. Now, Camille. Today, Eleanor was on the road by 7:30. She arrived at the cottage at 11:02. She had brought no overnight bag. She had brought nothing but the leather purse she always carried. Holt opened the door. Marlowe stood beside him in a clean dress, the one with the small embroidered flowers on the collar. Holt had told her only that a guest was coming. He had not said which kind. Marlowe stepped forward. She offered her hand the way she had been taught. Hello, ma'am. I'm Marlowe. Eleanor took the small hand. Her own was shaking. Hello, Marlowe. I am a friend of your aunt's. Camille had not used the word aunt yet. She let it stand. Marlowe studied Eleanor for a polite 3 seconds. May I be excused upstairs, Daddy? I have a map to finish. Yes, sweetheart. Marlowe climbed the stairs without looking back. They sat in the living room. Holt brought out tea. Eleanor took the cup but did not drink. The teacup made a small rattle against the saucer. She put it down. Camille. Mother, you found the photograph in the library. The one in the book. 6 weeks ago, I knew you had. I went to put a different book back on the shelf, and the gap was on the wrong side. I knew. Why didn't you ask me about it? Because I knew what you would ask me back. And I have been afraid of that question for 32 years. The room was quiet. Outside, gulls. Eleanor turned to Holt. She had not yet looked at him directly. She did now. You were married to my daughter. I was. I never knew her name. Margaret. Maggie. She was 28 when she died. How? Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4 when they caught it. 4 months from diagnosis. Eleanor closed her eyes a long time. When I was 19, she said, I was in love with a boy who worked at my father's boatyard. My parents told me they would put us both out on the street if I kept the baby. I signed the papers in a Catholic hospital in Portland. I was told the baby went to a good family in Vermont. I was told I would not be allowed to know more. Camille had never seen her mother cry. Not once. Not at her grandfather's funeral. Not at her father's. She did not cry now either, but her face was wet. I named her Margaret on the form. They told me the family was free to change it. I prayed every year on her birthday that they had kept it. They kept it, Holt said. What was she like? She was funny. She was sharp. She was kinder than I ever was. She drew maps, the way Marlowe does. She kept that photograph of you on her nightstand for 10 years and never knew who you were. Eleanor put her face in her hands. Holt rested his hand, very lightly, on the arm of her chair. Not on her, just on the chair. The way you steady a thing that might fall. Upstairs, in Marlowe's room, the soft sound of a colored pencil on paper went on, even and unhurried. Eleanor went to the inn that evening to rest. Camille did not go with her. She walked alone down the gravel path behind the resort, the one that led to the working wharf. The April air off the water still had winter in it. The boards were dark and damp. She did not hear Holt come up behind her. He had on the same coat. He carried a coil of mooring line in one hand. I have a boat to check on, he said. Of course you do. They walked to the end of the wharf together and stopped at the last piling. I remember something, Camille said after a while. When I was 10, my mother and Thea were in the sunroom. They thought I was upstairs. My mother said something I never understood. She said, before Spencer, there was a complication, and the complication has a face I see when I close my eyes. I thought it was about money. I thought it was about a business deal. I was 10. Maggie tried to find her, you know, Holt said. When she was 27, she wrote letters to the Archdiocese in Portland. The records were sealed. She got nothing back. A year later, they found the tumor. She told me one night, in the hospital, that she had wanted to know what her mother's voice sounded like. She did not say it like a complaint. She said it like a fact. Camille did not speak a while. The light on the water moved. Pemberton. Yes, you drove me to my uncle's funeral last October. Up to Bar Harbor. You sat in the car for 2 hours in the rain while I was inside. I remember. Did you know, at the time, that he was your sister's uncle too? No. I didn't know any of this on Friday. I knew it Saturday at 2 o'clock. By Saturday night I had not slept. By Monday morning your background check showed up in a courier bag. She let out a small sound, not a laugh, closer to a breath. The wind picked up. The boards under her feet were slick with the morning's rain. She turned to walk back and her heel caught. He had her elbow before she fully knew she had slipped. His hand was steady. He did not hold tighter than he needed to. He waited for her to find her footing. When she had, he did not let go right away. She did not pull away. They walked back along the planks side by side. She said very quietly, "Maggie was my sister." He did not answer in words. He nodded, once, slowly. At the end of the wharf where the gravel began, he stopped and let her elbow go, and stepped half a pace back the way a driver steps back when he opens the rear door for a passenger. The habit had not yet left him. He saw it leave his own hand. "Tomorrow," he said. "Thea wants us both in Portland. 8 o'clock. Us both? You and me." She said the words legal air. "I don't know what she has, but she has something." Camille looked back once at the water before they walked up the gravel together. The office was small. The desk was old. Thea Kelso had been practicing law in the same room since Eleanor was 23. A box sat on the desk between them. The cardboard yellowed at the corners, the seal on the top intact. "Sit," Thea said. They sat. "I have been waiting for a legal heir for 32 years, she said. "Today I have one." Thea cut the seal with a letter opener. "In 1994, she said. Eleanor came to me 3 weeks after she signed the surrender papers in Portland. She was 19. She brought $4,000 she had saved from a summer job, and an emerald ring her grandmother had left her. She told me to liquidate the ring and place the funds in a trust in the child's name. The trust was to be quiet. It was to grow. It was never to be touched. It was to be opened only when a direct blood heir of Margaret Crane could be legally identified." Thea opened a folder. Over the next 31 years, Eleanor added to the trust quietly, year after year. Bonuses from her work at Hadley Group. Inheritances from her own mother. The trust was managed offshore, under a corporate trustee in Wilmington, Delaware. As of the most recent statement, the principal stands at $45,300,000. Camille did not move. "The trustee on record," Thea said, "as of 2002, when Spencer Hadley took over the Hadley Group financial office, is Spencer Hadley." Eleanor signed the change. She trusted him. She did not have patience for paperwork. She slid a second folder across the table. "For 22 years, she said, Spencer Hadley has been reallocating the trust. Quietly, methodically. The funds have moved through 6 shell entities: Delaware, Bermuda, the Caymans. The trust statements that came to Eleanor each January were not the real ones. He prepared them himself." Holt had picked up the second folder before Thea finished speaking. He read. His eyes moved faster than Camille had thought possible. "Bermuda layering," he said, mostly to himself, round-tripping through a Cayman feeder. "Wilmington corporate trustee, Cross and Associates." He stopped. He looked up at Thea. "Cross and Associates," he said. "Yes. In 2020, I prosecuted a man named Edward Halleck for moving family trust assets through this exact structure. Same Wilmington firm, same trustee names. I won that case in federal court in Boston." "Yes." "Mr. Halleck was defended by counsel from a firm called Hadley and Cross." "Yes." Holt set the folder down. For the first time since Saturday afternoon, Camille saw him look something other than tired. "Spencer copied my own case file," he said, "page for page. He used the structure I dismantled in court. He thought no one was reading." Thea said quietly, "Mr. Pemberton, do you know who has been reading?" He almost smiled. "Not quite. I do now." Thea closed the folder. "There are 2 things to do," she said. "Recover the trust, and remove Spencer Hadley from the company. The trust we can recover with the documents we have. The removal will require a board majority. The board votes Friday." Camille turned to Holt. "My daughter," he said before she could ask, "is the legal heir. The trust is hers. I will not let him touch what is hers. I will also not let him touch you." Camille did not look away. Friday then. News of the Portland meeting reached Spencer within 36 hours. He did not waste time. On Wednesday morning, he called an emergency board meeting for Friday afternoon. The agenda named one item, a no-confidence vote in the chief executive officer, on the grounds of unverified personal entanglements distracting from corporate stewardship. On Wednesday afternoon, the head of the Hadley fleet received an internal memo directing the immediate termination of one Pemberton, H.R., for violation of client confidentiality protocols during the transport of an executive principal on Saturday last. Spencer's signature was at the bottom. He had never met Pemberton. On Wednesday evening, a private investigator with a long lens parked in a rental sedan at the end of the dirt lane behind the wharf in Camden and photographed Eleanor Hadley walking up the steps of the cottage. By Thursday at noon, all three moves were known to Holt, to Thea, and to Camille. That night, Holt drove to the small rented house Camille kept on the Camden side, a stone's throw from the inn. It was the first time he had been inside any private space of hers. He took off his boots at the door. She had pushed back the rug in the dining room. Documents were laid out on the long table in 3 rows. Bank records, trust statements, shell company registration filings. He walked the length of the table once. Then again, he pointed. This is layering. 3 transfers through entities in 3 jurisdictions in 7 days, each one within 10% of the prior balance. The triggering pattern is the same in every quarter. He paid himself, in effect, by routing the money through a Cayman feeder back to a Delaware management company he owned through a nominee. This is a violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1957, money laundering, knowing involvement, premeditated. She listened. She did not interrupt. To prosecute him criminally is the Department of Justice's call, he went on. What we need to do Friday is colder. We need to convince a board of corporate trustees that he is a financial liability the company can no longer carry. For that, we don't need to prove a crime. We need to show that the public proof is coming. And is it? Once Thea files the trust grievance Monday morning, it becomes a federal matter within the week. There is no path on which Spencer is still a board chairman in a month. She reached for a page at the far corner of the table. Her hand passed over his on the wood. They both stilled. Neither pulled back. The rain that had been holding off all evening hit the kitchen window in a single soft sheet. She left her hand where it was, not on top of his, beside it. Thank you, Holt. It was the first time in 3 years she had used his name. He did not move his hand. He did not look up. This is my sister's case, Camille. There's no thanks owed. He had used her name in return without thinking. They both heard it. She let her hand stay where it was another breath, then drew it back and turned the page. They worked until almost 2. Marlowe was at the babysitter's overnight. Holt did not say so. Neither did she. When he finally stood to put on his coat, the rain had stopped, and a band of pale sky was visible over the harbor. At the door, she said, "Friday." "Friday," he said. He drove the empty inland road home in the gray hour before sunrise. Eleanor asked, through Camille, whether she might come to the cottage one more time before Friday. Not as a stranger this time, not as a guest, as a woman who would like to be introduced, properly, to her granddaughter. Holt thought about it for a day. He said yes. She came on Thursday at noon. Marlowe was home from school for a teacher's day. She had laid out her colored pencils on the coffee table in a row, in order from yellow to violet. "Marlowe," Holt said. "This is Eleanor." "Hello again, ma'am." "Hello, Marlowe." Marlowe studied her. "Daddy says you knew my mother when she was little." Holt had been preparing that sentence for 2 days. He had chosen the words on purpose. "In a way," Eleanor said. "Yes." Marlowe opened her sketchbook. "I'm drawing a map of a house I never saw. Mama told me about it once. She said it was the house her great-grandma lived in, with the gray porch and the spruce tree, and the long driveway down to the rocks. Mama said she only saw it in a dream." Eleanor's hand went to the arm of the couch. The house was her mother's house, in Rockland, with the gray porch and the spruce tree and the long driveway down to the rocks. Sold in 1989, 16 years before Maggie ever knew it existed. "May I see?" Eleanor said. Marlowe turned the sketchbook around. "Would you like to know what your grandmother looked like, Marlowe?" Eleanor said, very quietly. "I have a picture," Marlowe said. "Daddy keeps it in the wooden box. It's the same as one in Miss Hadley's purse, but Daddy says they're different copies of the same picture." Eleanor leaned down. Her face was level with the child's. She put her hand on the back of Marlowe's hand. Marlowe did not pull her hand away. Eleanor's eyes were closed. "Would you like me to show you how the spruce tree was on the south side?" Marlowe said. "Mama said it was on the south. I drew it on the north by mistake." "Yes," Eleanor said. "Yes, I would like that very much." They bent together over the map. After a while, Eleanor took a pencil. In the hallway, Holt watched. Then he stepped out onto the porch. Eleanor came out 40 minutes later. She had been crying without sound. She did not wipe her face. "I do not deserve any of this," she said. "I am not the one who decides that. If she ever asks, when she is older, why I was not in her mother's life, you tell her the truth. Do not make it kinder. I would like to be remembered honestly, even if it is badly. Maggie would have wanted her to know you. That is what I will tell her." Eleanor looked at him a long moment. "You are a very good father, Mr. Pemberton." He did not answer that. Camille was waiting at the end of the gravel drive, leaning against her car. She did not come in. When Eleanor reached her, Camille only said, "Stay in Camden tonight, Mother. Do not go back to Boston." Eleanor nodded. The two women drove away together in Camille's car. Holt went back inside to his daughter, who was carefully erasing a spruce tree on the wrong side of a map. The 34th floor of Hadley Tower had glass on 3 walls and a view down the length of Boston Harbor. 12 people sat around the table. Spencer Hadley sat at the head. Camille walked in with Thea Kelso on her left. The man on her right was in a charcoal gray suit. He carried a thin leather folder. He did not look at Spencer. He did not look at anyone. It took Spencer 3 seconds. "The driver." "Mr. Hadley," Camille said, "the agenda for today's meeting has been amended." Spencer half rose. "On whose authority?" "Mine," Camille said. "And before I continue, allow me to introduce counsel." She set a thin, laminated card on the polished table and slid it down to the center. "Holt R. Pemberton, former Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation, White Collar Crime Division, Boston Field Office, 2018 to 2022. Spencer Hadley's face lost color in a clean line from his hairline down to his collar. In 2020, the case of United States versus Halleck had taken the inside pages of the Wall Street Journal. He had read it standing in his kitchen. He had set the paper down on the granite and copied the structural diagram by hand into a notebook that night. He had thought he had improved it. Holt did not stand to present. He stayed seated. He spoke for 7 minutes. He used the language of accounting. He did not use the language of feeling. When he finished, the room was quiet. Thea Kelso placed a single sealed document in the center of the table. "The Margaret Crane Trust," she said, "as constituted in 1994 by Eleanor Hadley, then Eleanor Crane, is to be reconstituted in the name of Margaret Crane Pemberton, deceased, with full balance restored, under the guardianship of her surviving heir, the minor child Marlowe Ann Pemberton. The board's authority does not extend to the trust, but it does extend to the chairmanship of this company." Spencer began to speak. The door opened. Eleanor Hadley walked in. She was wearing the gray wool coat she had been married in. She had not taken it off. She did not sit. She said, "Spencer, you will resign from this board today, or I will end this marriage tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock with the firm Mrs. Kelso has retained. You choose." The room did not breathe. Spencer looked at the laminated card. He looked at the trust document. He looked at his wife of 26 years. He resigned. He resigned in writing on a yellow legal pad before he left the room. The vote was conducted anyway, for the record. It was 11-0. The Department of Justice received the case file before close of business that day. The Margaret Crane Trust was restored to the name of Marlowe Ann Pemberton, with Holt as guardian of record, by Tuesday of the following week. The wire transfer cleared at 3:18 on Tuesday afternoon. $45,300,012. In Camden, the wire confirmation came through to Holt's phone in the workshop where he was sanding the leg of a kitchen chair. He read it. He set the phone down. He kept sanding. 4 months later, in early April, the harbor in Camden was the color of pewter. The snow was gone from the gravel paths. The first crocuses had come up around the cottage steps. A gull walked the wharf board by board, unhurried. Holt did not drive for Hadley Group anymore. He had given his notice 2 days after the board meeting. He had not gone back to the bureau. He was thinking about consulting. Civil, not criminal. Family trust disputes. He could work from the cottage. He could be home when Marlowe got off the bus. Marlowe had asked him, in March, whether Miss Hadley would still come up on weekends. He had said he hoped so. She had nodded the way she nodded about the weather and gone back to her map. Camille had stepped down as chief executive officer and accepted the chairmanship of Hadley Group. She had appointed a new chief executive from the operations side. She kept an apartment in Boston, but spent 3 days a week in Camden in the small house she had rented through the winter and now leased through the year. Eleanor came up on weekends. Marlowe called her Grandma Elle. They walked the wharf together in the late afternoons, slowly, the way a woman of 51 and a child of 7 walk together when neither is in a hurry. Eleanor never raised her voice. She never explained. She listened, and when Marlowe handed her a colored pencil, she took it. On the small bookshelf in Holt's workshop, 2 photographs were now framed. The one of Maggie was where it had always been. Beside it, recently, Camille had hung a new one. Marlowe and Camille, sitting side by side on the gray boards of the wharf, both looking out at the water, not at the camera, both wearing the same expression around the mouth. One afternoon in April, the 2 of them stood at the workbench, looking down at Marlowe's latest map. It was the house in Rockland. The spruce tree was on the south side now. The driveway curved properly. The porch was gray. She got it right, Camille said. She always gets it right eventually, Holt said. Camille's hand rested on the worn pine of the bench beside his. The distance between her smallest finger and his was about the width of one knuckle. Neither of them closed the distance. Neither pulled away. Outside, on the porch, Marlowe was reading aloud to Eleanor from a book about birds. "Daddy," she called through the screen door, "Grandma Elle says the spruce on the south side is right. Can we go to Rockland on Sunday and see if the house is still there? We can drive by, sweetheart. If you want. Can Miss Hadley come?" A pause. Camille did not turn her head. "Yes," Holt said. "Miss Hadley can come." The light over the harbor was the color of old silver. The gull on the wharf finished its walk and lifted into the sky. The workshop smelled of pine shavings and beeswax and the salt air through the open door. Neither of them had been looking for any of this.